Hey guys, tonight we're walking into a village that does not yet know what is coming. It is late spring in the year 1348, somewhere in the rolling countryside of Western Europe. The wheat is rising green in the fields, the air carries the smell of wood smoke from hearths, and a flock of geese are honking like they own the place. The bell of the parish church clangs across the rooftops, but for now it signals only the Angelus prayer, not a death knell. You step into this world as though it were your own, except you should probably keep in mind you won't survive this. Statistics are not your friend in the 14th century, but before the sickness comes creeping, you should know what there is to lose. So welcome to your medieval village. Picture a cluster of timber-framed houses, their walls plastered with a mixture of mud and straw, roofs thatched so thickly with reeds they look ready to swallow the rain. A single dirt road winds through the heart of the place, usually churned into mud by the hooves of oxen and the bare feet of children. Chickens scratch everywhere on thresholds, on dung heaps, even in the churchyard. You can't swing a sack of turnips without hitting a chicken. The soundscape is a mix of bleating goats, the hammering of a blacksmith, and the gossip of women at the well. Most villagers rise with the sun. You do too, though you'd really rather snooze a bit longer, under the wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep. But the day does not wait. Fields need ploughing, firewood needs chopping, and you need to shuffle into the yard before the pigs break loose again. Life here is simple and brutal, though not without rhythm. Everyone knows his or her place. You, most likely, are a peasant. About 90% of people are. You might till your lord's land 3 days a week, then spend the rest on your own small strips. The soil is not generous. One bad harvest and you're bargaining with starvation. Yet, somehow, it works. The village has its order. The reeve, elected by peasants but answerable to the manor, collects rents and ensures everyone shows up for work on the lord's fields. The blacksmith repairs ploughshares and sometimes horseshoes, though you don't own a horse unless you've had an extremely lucky streak. The miller grinds your grain. And yes, he always seems to take more than his fair share. You've grumbled about him for years, but you still hand him your sacks because there's no other option. If you want bread, you go through him. At the centre stands the church, built of stone, with a crooked tower that leans slightly, as if tired from centuries of prayers. The priest is the most literate man in the parish, which isn't saying much. He can read Latin, and he can tell you exactly how sinful you are. His sermons stretch on about gluttony, pride and envy, while you're secretly thinking about whether the beans need weeding. Still, you listen, because heaven and hell are not abstract concepts here. They are the only safety nets available. Children scamper barefoot, playing with sticks, chasing after hoops or rolling pig bladders as balls. Their laughter fills the lanes, though it also means they're tracking mud into every house. By the age of 7, they're considered small adults, expected to fetch water, mind animals, and endure discipline. Childhood is short, chores are long. You might chuckle at the sight of a boy swinging a stick and declaring himself a knight, but the reality is that his father is a ploughman, and he'll be one too. The village economy relies on barter and obligation. You owe grain to your lord, eggs to the priest, labour on the road, or the bridge if repairs are needed. Market day in the nearest town is when you actually get to see coins, though even then they feel like alien objects. You might trade a basket of onions for a length of cloth, and that suits most people fine. Life is a closed loop. Most never travel more than 10 miles from where they were born. The seasons dictate everything. In spring, you're bent over the fields, planting. In summer, you weed and sweat and swat flies. In autumn, you harvest until your hands blister. In winter, you huddle around the fire, praying the stored grain lasts. You live with hunger constantly whispering at the door, but you also live with festivals, saints' days, Christmas feasts, May dances. It's not all gloom. There is music from fiddles. There are tales told by firelight. There are jugs of ale shared until someone inevitably tries to juggle and fails. Your clothing scratches. Wool tunics in shades of brown or grey, patched so many times they resemble a quilt. Leather boots if you're lucky, clogs if you're not. Washing is rare. The river serves for bathing in summer, but in winter you just accept that you and your neighbours are going to smell like a sheepfold. Strangely, You get used to it. If someone actually showed up freshly washed and perfumed, you'd probably suspect witchcraft. The diet is monotony with occasional surprises. Bread, pottage, a stew of grains and whatever vegetables are lying around, ale, and on special days, a scrap of bacon or a fish. Cheese appears often, though it's hard, salty and smells suspiciously like the boots. Meat is for feasts. A roasted goose can feed an entire family, though catching it from the yard might require a military campaign. Sweetness is rare, but honey is sometimes drizzled like gold over bread. When a fare comes through, you taste almonds or raisins, and it feels like touching heaven. The houses themselves are dim, smoky, and cramped. One room for cooking, eating, sleeping. A central hearth burns peat or wood, the smoke curling up to a hole in the roof, or sometimes not, so it curls right into your lungs. Beds are shared, privacy is a fantasy. You might sleep with your entire family on straw stuffed with chaff, fleas included for free. If you're very unlucky, you also share with a goat, because why waste good warmth? Amid all this, there is a sense of belonging. Everyone knows everyone. The village is both your prison and your home. When the reeve calls out names, you all gather. When someone marries, the bells ring, and everyone celebrates. When someone dies, the bells toll, and everyone mourns. You are bound together by necessity, faith, and the constant reminder that survival is not an individual achievement, but a collective one. This is your world in 3048. Noisy, smelly, cramped, full of toil and laughter, of hunger and festivals. You think the biggest threats are crop failure, a bad winter, or maybe your neighbor stealing your sheep. You do not yet know that a far more terrible visitor is on its way, one carried not by raiders or armies, but by something far smaller, crawling unseen in the fur of rats. The roads that bring salt and cloth and news will soon bring death, and though you don't yet hear its footsteps, the ground beneath you is already trembling. The rumors don't arrive with fanfare. They slip into the village the way rain leaks through a thatched roof, quiet at first, and then impossible to ignore. You hear it at the well, where women gossip while filling buckets. You hear it from a peddler with a cart of trinkets, his voice lowered, as if the words themselves might bring sickness. A town not far away has seen a strange affliction, he says. People swelling with boils, blackened in the face, dropping in the street. Some blame poisoned wells, others whisper about Jews, others still insist it is God's wrath for sins unconfessed. You glance at your neighbor, both of you with mud on your boots, and wonder which of you has confessed recently. The merchants from the nearest market town are the real carriers of news. They speak of villages emptied in days, of funerals too many to count. They mention Genoa and Venice, names that feel distant but carry weight, because everything from salt to spices seems to pass through them. They say ships brought death across the sea, and now caravans carry it inland. To a peasant, ships are as foreign as dragons, but caravans you understand. Caravans bring cloth, coins, and pilgrims. If they also bring death, there's no barrier to stop it. Your priest tries to calm the village. At Sunday Mass, he lifts his hands, his voice echoing through the nave. He says the stories are exaggerated, that sin and repentance are what matter, not distant rumors, but his eyes flicker toward the crucifix longer than usual, and his sermons grow more intense. He warns that fasting, prayers, and almsgiving are the only shields. You nod, but you notice he has also stocked up on candles and incense, as if the smoke might drive death back into the forest. By midsummer, the fear seeps deeper. You hear of a nearby town 15 miles away, but close enough to feel like a breath on your neck, where the graveyard is full. A carter passing through tells of seeing corpses piled like firewood outside the walls. He swears he saw priests carrying bodies with their bare hands, chanting as if words could smother disease. You don't know if he's telling the truth, but you do know his face is pale, and his cart is nearly empty. At the inn, really more of a smoky room with ale and straw mats. The men argue about causes. One swears it's the Jews, another insists it's lepers, another claims it's a bad alignment of the planets. Someone even mutters about cats, and you silently hope he's wrong because you like the way they keep the mice out of the granary. The conversation always circles back to sin. If we had prayed more, if we had fasted harder, if the priest had rung the bells longer, yet the unease grows, because you've prayed, you've fasted, you've endured sermons, and still the rumours creep closer. Children sense the change. They hear the whispers, see their parents' frowns, and their games take on strange twists. They pretend to fall dead in the dirt, then leap up again laughing, only to be scolded sharply. Fear bends even the jokes. You try to smile, but inside you feel the earth tilting. The Lord Steward visits from the manor, trying to maintain order. He speaks briskly of dues, rents, and the autumn harvest, but even he cannot ignore the talk. He warns against fleeing the village. Too many runaways leave fields untended, and famine is as dangerous as plague. His guards mutter that deserters will be whipped, but their voices lack conviction. You notice one guard coughing, and though it is probably just dust, your stomach twists. Travellers still come, though fewer. A friar passes through, barefoot, carrying a wooden cross, declaring the sickness is punishment for greed. He urges the village to hold a procession, whipping themselves to show repentance. A few take up the lash, their backs striped raw, while the rest watch in a mixture of pity and fear. You suspect the friar has seen worse than he admits. His eyes dart at every cough, his lips tremble when he blesses children. The market begins to thin. Merchants who once came weekly now avoid your lanes. Salt grows expensive, cloth scarcer. You barter more with neighbours, clutching your stores of beans and barley tighter. Fear is not yet here in flesh, but it is already reshaping your world. And then, one evening, word arrives that the plague has been seen in the next valley, only 2 villages away. A woman, swollen with boils, died in less than a day. Her family followed within the week. The rumour spreads like wildfire, leaping from house to house. By morning it feels as though the shadow is already falling across your roofs. Mothers clutch children tighter. Fathers sharpen tools not because they will fight, but because work is the only weapon they know. The bell rings for morning prayers, but fewer people attend. The pews echo with emptiness. You sense the shift. This is no longer gossip about distant lands. This is a neighbour's neighbour, a place you've walked past with sheep, a place where you know faces. The plague is moving like a slow tide, and your village is standing in its path. You wonder if the road that leads past your fields will carry more than merchants and pilgrims this time. You wonder if you should bolt your door, but a locked door cannot keep out breath, and the air feels heavier each day. The first signs arrive quietly, almost as if the sickness is testing the village before declaring itself. A child falls ill, nothing unusual at first. Children often sicken in the summer heat, struck by fevers, bellies upset from drinking water pulled straight from the stream. But within hours, the mother notices a swelling under the child's arm, hot and angry, the skin stretched taut and dark. By the next morning, the swelling has grown to the size of a hen's egg, and the child's cries turn hoarse, as though the throat itself is closing. The family shutters their house, smoke from the hearth leaking through the thatch, and the lane outside grows silent. You pass by with a basket of firewood and you do not hear laughter anymore, only the creak of the door closing, the whisper of prayers through thin walls. At first, the others tell themselves it is something else. Perhaps a fever from bad air, or a curse laid upon the family for unconfessed sins. You repeat it too, because it's easier than admitting the rumours were true. But when the father himself begins to cough, clutching his chest, and by dusk his body is carried to the churchyard, denial collapses. The village watches from doorways as the priest mutters hurried Latin, sprinkling holy water over a grave dug too shallow. The grave digger doesn't pause. He's sweating, his shovel striking earth faster than his prayers. Within days, the sickness spreads. Another household closes its shutters, then another. A woman walking to the well collapses before she can draw water. By the time her neighbours lift her from the dust, her skin is already mottled, as though ink stains bloom beneath the flesh. She dies before nightfall. Panic claws at the village. Families retreat indoors, leaving chores half done, fields half weeded, oxen bellow unattended in their pens. The rhythm of work that held life together falters. The symptoms are impossible to ignore. Buboes swell beneath arms and groins, black blotches flower on skin, fevers rage until the body shakes and the mind unravels. The priest insists on confession, leaning over the sick, pressing the cross to lips cracked with thirst. His bravery earns whispers of respect, but you notice the trembling in his hands when he lifts the chalice at Mass. You cannot help but wonder how long before he too succumbs. Some attempt remedies. A neighbor burns herbs inside her house until the smoke chokes her children. She swears it will drive out the evil. Another ties a live chicken against his swollen neck, claiming the bird will draw out the poison. The chicken dies. The man follows. And still people try. A carpenter carves charms into wood, hangs them above doors, and declares them proof against contagion. The charms rot in the rain, and death walks past them anyway. The market stalls in the center of the village stand empty now. Where once women haggled over onions and bread, silence hangs. Chickens still peck the dirt, oblivious to human fear. The mill wheel turns, but no one waits with grain, for they fear gathering near others. The rhythm of bells changes too. No longer do they ring only for prayers or feast days. They toll again and again, slow and heavy, marking not hours, but lives extinguished. Each toll feels like a stone dropped in your stomach. Neighbors eye one another with suspicion. A cough in the street makes heads turn sharply. A man with sweat on his brow is avoided as though he carries fire in his breath. Children are kept indoors, pressed to mothers' skirts. Friends who once shared ale at the inn now pass one another with curt nods, distance widening with each step. Fear has made everyone strangers. And yet, daily tasks cannot simply vanish. Sheep still need herding, water must be drawn, bread must be baked. You find yourself performing chores in silence, eyes scanning constantly, as if the sickness has become a predator in the fields. The smell of smoke hangs heavy, villagers burning belongings of the dead, hoping flame will cleanse what prayers could not. The air tastes of ash, and your tongue feels dry no matter how much ale you swallow. The priest organizes a procession, though few attend. Those who come carry candles, chanting hymns as they circle the churchyard. Their voices quaver, some out of piety, others out of terror. Behind shuttered windows, families watch, afraid to join, but afraid to ignore. By dawn, one of the candle bearers is dead. The procession ends, and no one suggests another. By the second week, the village feels hollowed out. Doors are bolted, lanes deserted. You walk past houses where you once heard laughter, and now you hear only muffled coughing or nothing at all. A cart creaks by with two bodies laid side by side, a thin cloth covering their faces. Flies buzz, settling and lifting again in lazy clouds. The driver does not meet your eyes. Still, some refuse to accept it fully. It's only a fever, one man insists as his wife gasps beside him. He strokes her hair, repeating the words as though repetition will change reality. By dusk, he is silent, his arms slack around her body. You see them carried out the next morning, and the words die on your lips. The plague has arrived, and there is no longer any denying it. It is no longer rumor, no longer something that happens to distant cities or neighboring valleys. It is here, moving from house to house, claiming faces you know, voices you once heard at the well, hands that once helped lift your plough. You feel it pressing closer each day, and though you shut your door and mutter prayers, you know wooden words are thin walls against an enemy you cannot see. Word count or waiting continue. Fear spreads quicker than the illness itself. Long before every household feels the plague's hand, the suspicion, the distance, and the breaking of habits hollow out the village like rot working through an apple. You notice it when you go to fetch water. Women who once chatted as they drew from the well now stand apart, each waiting until the last jug has been filled before stepping forward. Buckets clank on the stones, ropes squeak, but voices are low or absent. Where gossip once flowed thicker than the water, silence rules. Neighbors eye one another as if friendship itself is contagious. The old widow who relied on the family next door for bread is left waiting longer at her doorstep. The young smith who once borrowed tools freely now finds doors barred when he knocks. You sense that charity has grown thin, rationed like grain. Fear transforms every cough into an omen, every sweat-soaked brow into a threat. The marketplace. Once the heartbeat of village life is nearly still, merchants approach, see the shuttered homes, and turn their carts back towards safer towns. The mill stands idle, because no one dares bring sacks of grain to be ground. The wheel creaks uselessly in the river current, a sound like an empty stomach groaning. You remember when the air was full of flour dust, children chasing each other while waiting for bread. Now even the pigeons seem hesitant to gather. Inside homes, families huddle, speaking in whispers, as though quiet could trick death into passing by. Some hang bunches of herbs above their doors, the smell of rosemary and sage sharp against the damp. Others draw chalk crosses on thresholds, muttering prayers as they do, but no one is sure what truly helps, and suspicion sharpens with each day. If a family escapes the illness, people whisper that they must have hidden charms or struck bargains with spirits. If they sicken, the whispers turn into murmurs that perhaps they brought it upon themselves with sin. The church bell tolls more frequently, its low boom rolling over thatched roofs like a storm cloud. Yet fewer people come to the church itself. Fear of close contact keeps pews half empty. Even at Sunday Mass, the priest urges his flock not to abandon the sacraments, not to forsake faith, but you notice even he keeps his distance from coughing parishioners. Confession is whispered quickly, the priest leaning just close enough to hear. Some villagers stand outside, hoping prayers shouted through the open door will reach heaven just as well as those muttered inside. The fields do not pause for fear, though fewer hands tend them. Crops sag under weeds, oxen stumble from neglect. You trudge out to pull stones from a row, glancing constantly toward the lane, as if the plague might walk down it like a thief. The work is lonely now. Where once neighbours toiled shoulder to shoulder, sharing jokes or complaints, now you find yourself bent over in silence, sweat running into your eyes, the furrows stretching on endlessly. You notice crows circling more often, whether they are drawn by neglected fields or by the churchyard you cannot say. Even in small gatherings, suspicion bristles. When men are called to repair a broken fence near the manor, they stand feet apart, tools in hand, speaking only of the wooden nails. No one dares share bread. A skin of ale passes, but hands linger on the strap, wiped quickly on tunics before being gnawed. Jokes fall flat. Laughter feels like a language everyone has forgotten. Children sense it most cruelly. They are scolded for playing together, pulled indoors when they try to chase each other across the green. Their laughter is treated as reckless, dangerous. Parents hush them with sharp words, eyes darting as if joy itself could invite death. The games with sticks and hoops vanish, replaced by quiet hours inside, watching the smoke twist up through the roof hole. Fear also reshapes the village's nights. Once, summer evenings carried the hum of voices, neighbours lingering outdoors, the smell of roasting meat or brewing ale rising through the air. Now, doors slam shut early, windows glow faintly with candlelight, then are darkened. Only the sound of dogs barking or owls hooting breaks the stillness. You lie awake listening, each cough or groan from a nearby house, a reminder of what stalks you. The inn, smoky and raucous in better days, has grown hushed. The bench that creaked beneath the weight of men drinking after the fields now sits empty most nights. The ale grows stale in its cask. When a few do gather, their talk is clipped, focused on who has fallen sick, who has died, who might be next. No songs, no boasts, no fiddles. Just the shuffle of feet and the long gulps of ale meant more to numb fear than to celebrate. Suspicion seeps even into families. A husband hesitates to comfort his feverish wife. A mother fears touching her child's swollen skin. Love wars with terror, and sometimes terror wins. You hear whispers of parents barring sick children in rooms, of siblings fleeing when coughs grow too harsh. You cannot say what you would do, but you know that death's shadow forces choices you never imagined. At the edges of the village, a few leave altogether. A family is seen walking the road at dawn, packs strapped across shoulders, children crying as they trudge. They vanish into the mist, and no one follows. Some mutter they are cowards, abandoning their duties. Others envy them, wondering if flight is the only hope. The steward's warnings about desertion echo, but fear makes obedience fragile. The plague has not yet struck every household, but fear already has. It rules the lanes, shapes conversations, dictates how far you stand from a neighbor. It is in the way people glance at each other's faces, the way voices drop, the way doors are shut, and you begin to realize that even if you survive, something inside the village has already changed forever. The church bells toll so often now, they have become a background rhythm, like the sound of wind through the fields or the creak of cartwheels on the road. Yet every toll means another body lowered into earth, another family reduced. The priest, once a familiar and steady figure, has taken on a new presence. He is not only shepherd of souls, but also the voice that binds the village together when fear would scatter it. You watch him step through the lanes, cassock swaying, eyes hollow from sleepless night. Children cling to mothers' skirts when he passes. They know that wherever he goes, the sick lie waiting. He calls the villagers to prayer more often than ever before. Morning mass, midday litanies, evening vigils, candles burning at all hours, smoke curling toward the rafters, until the church smells more of wax than of wood. You kneel on the cold flagstones, your knees aching, your breath mixing with dozens of others. The prayers are louder, more desperate. People who once whispered now cry out, voices breaking, tears running down cheeks lined with dirt. Kyrie eleison. Lord have mercy. The chant echoes, filling the stone walls, as if sheer volume might reach heaven. Processions wind through the streets too, crosses lifted high, banners of saints unfurled, villagers walking barefoot with candles in hand. Some carry relics, a bone fragment, a saint's medal, holding them like shields. The priest leads, his voice hoarse, calling for forgiveness. Behind him a few men whip themselves, leather thongs cracking against their backs, blood streaking their tunics. They believe their pain will draw God's pity. You walk in the line, candle wax dripping onto your fingers, the smoke stinging your eyes. The silence between hymns is heavier than the songs themselves, each cough or groan sending a ripple of fear down the line. At funerals, rites grow shorter. The priest hurries, hands trembling as he sprinkles holy water. He cannot linger over each soul. There are too many waiting. The churchyard fills faster than anyone imagined. Graves are dug hastily, earth piled high, the smell of fresh soil mingling with incense. The grave digger no longer stops to rest. His hands blister, his back bends, his eyes are glassy. Still, he digs. You watch him lower another body, his lips moving soundlessly, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in exhaustion. Faith is both comfort and burden. People gather for Mass because they fear God's wrath more than contagion, but attendance falters as sickness spreads. Some families refuse to leave their homes, convinced that prayer alone in the shadow of their hearth will suffice. Others believe only the church's stones can protect them, and they cram inside, shoulders pressed, breaths mingling, each prayer risking exposure. You find yourself caught between fear of death and fear of damnation. You kneel in the pew, listening to the priest's words about eternal life, but your mind drifts to the cough behind you. Confession takes on new urgency. Men and women queue in silence, faces pale, eyes darting. They confess sins long hidden, voices trembling. Theft, adultery, blasphemy, lies. Some confess for hours, pouring out their lives as if emptying a sack of grain before it spoils. The priest listens, sometimes nodding, sometimes weeping with them. He offers absolution quickly, because time is short, and sin cannot wait for leisure. You too whisper your confessions, ashamed and desperate, clinging to the belief that forgiveness will shield you even if medicine cannot. But doubts creep in. Why does God not relent? Why do the innocent die first? Children gasping in their mother's arms, while drunkards still stumble out of their homes alive. Some mutter that the priest himself has failed, that prayers are insufficient, that perhaps he hides secret sins. A few even whisper that God has abandoned them, though they speak the words only behind closed doors. Faith holds the village together, but cracks widen each day, like ice breaking on a thawing river. The priest preaches longer, louder, more urgently. He warns of the end of days, of judgment at hand. His words echo through the nave, but you notice his hands shake when he lifts the host. He coughs once, twice, then steadies himself. You watch his face closely, wondering if the plague has marked him too. You realize that if he falls, the village will lose more than a man. It will lose the last thread of order holding it. Children still gather at the church steps, though fewer each week. They light small candles, their hands too small to hold them steady. Wax drips onto stone, pooling into hardened lumps. They pray with wide eyes, not fully understanding, only knowing that parents demand it. You see their lips forming Latin words they cannot translate, their voices high and fragile. You wonder if God listens to children first, if their innocence might pierce the heavens more easily than your weary pleas. At night you hear chanting from houses where families have gathered to pray. Rosaries click, hymns rise and fall. Some sing until their voices crack, others fall silent mid-verse as if overwhelmed by despair. The sound drifts through the lanes, carried on smoke and wind, turning the village into a single trembling choir. You lie awake listening, half comforted, half terrified, because prayer has become the only weapon left. And yet, despite everything, some still find slivers of light. A mother sings a hymn softly while rocking her feverish child. A father kneels with his sons, teaching them to cross themselves. The priest, gaunt and weary, still raises the chalice each morning, still blesses each grave, still walks among the dying. Faith may not stop the plague, but it binds the living long enough to endure another day. You realize that the church bell no longer startles you. Its toll is constant, like breath. Each time it rings, you murmur a prayer without thinking. The word's automatic. Fear remains, but so does ritual. Perhaps that is what survival means now. Not the absence of fear, but the rhythm of prayer, keeping you from drowning in it. The remedies begin to multiply as quickly as the sickness. Each one offered with desperate conviction, none with proof. You watch your neighbours turn their homes into smoky dens of herbs. Bundles of rosemary, sage and lavender dangle from rafters, their fragrances thick in the air, until stepping inside feels like walking into a spice market. The village reeks of burning juniper, sharp and acrid, making your eyes water. People mutter that smoke drives out evil vapours. Whether it does or not, it certainly drives out your appetite. Some remedies verge on the absurd. A farmer ties a live chicken to his neck, believing the bird's warmth will draw the poison from his swelling. The chicken squawks in misery, flapping its wings weakly before dying. The farmer follows 2 days later, his wife whispering that the cure had been attempted too late. Another woman crushes emeralds into powder, stirring them into wine and drinking the mixture with solemn reverence. She survives a week longer than her neighbour, but dies just the same. The miller's wife insists vinegar baths will save them. The miller soaks daily, reeking like a pickled onion, while his children cough themselves into graves. The village wise woman offers her own charms. She mixes herbs with honey, presses poultices against the swellings, whispers prayers older than Christianity. Some claim she is blessed, others hiss witch behind her back. But when their children sicken, they come knocking anyway, clutching handfuls of eggs or scraps of cloth to pay her. You see her walking through the lanes, basket on her arm, eyes weary. She looks no healthier than anyone else, but hope makes people see miracles where there are none. Foreign physicians occasionally pass through, their masks terrifying. Beaked faces stuffed with herbs, leather cloaks, gloves, looking less like men than birds of omen. They prod patients with long sticks, mutter diagnoses about corrupted air, and scribble notes in Latin no one understands. They recommend bloodletting, so veins are opened and bowls filled, leaving the sick pale and weaker than before. They leave as quickly as they come, their purses heavier, their advice forgotten when the next body stiffens. The priest himself turns to relics. He places a bone of a saint upon the altar, declaring it a shield against the pestilence. Villagers kneel, touching their foreheads to the stone, believing that contact with holiness might preserve them. Yet even relics cannot halt the tolling bell. Each day it rings, and each day fewer gather at the altar. Faith and folk medicine intertwine, desperation knotting them together into a net full of holes. You too, try what you can. You chew cloves when your throat feels dry. You tie a cloth soaked in vinegar over your mouth when you fetch water. You keep rosemary sprigs in your tunic, inhaling sharply whenever someone coughs near you. Do they help? Who knows, but doing nothing feels like surrender, and at least the smell covers the stench of sickness that seeps from shuttered homes. The fear of contagion changes behavior. People no longer sit shoulder to shoulder at the ale bench. Instead, they shout across the room, mugs held in hands that tremble. Bread is left at doors rather than handed directly. Even tools are exchanged by laying them on the ground for the other to pick up. Human touch, once constant in this close-knit village, has become dangerous, almost forbidden. Stories spread about miraculous survivals. A boy who drank only beer instead of water remained healthy. Soon half the village is tipsy, declaring beer the true elixir of life. A woman who lived in her orchard, breathing the air of apple trees, never sickened. Her neighbors drag bedding into their gardens, shivering under the stars at night. Someone insists garlic wards off illness. Soon every meal reeks, and you joke grimly that at least the plague will die from the smell. 3 laughs ripple around you, the first you've heard in days, but they die quickly when the miller coughs into his sleeve. Amulets appear on necks, carved with crosses or strange runes. Children clutch them while sleeping. Mothers kiss them when husbands leave for the fields. When someone wearing an amulet dies, the explanation is that they must have lacked faith, not that the charm failed. Belief becomes its own medicine, though belief cannot stop bodies from stiffening. You notice the desperation in eyes. Remedies are less about curing the sick than about soothing the living. To act, even foolishly, is better than admitting helplessness. To sprinkle vinegar, to hang herbs, to chant charms, these are the small defenses that keep despair at bay. Without them, fear might hollow you out faster than fever. Still, the plague does not relent. Each remedy is tested, each one fails, and yet people keep trying, because to stop would be to admit the truth, that there is no cure, no herb, no relic, no charm strong enough. Only survival by chance, by providence, by fate or not at all. And so the village stinks of vinegar and smoke, herbs and sweat, incense and blood, a mixture of odours so thick you carry them on your clothes, your hair, your very skin. The air itself feels heavy with desperation. You breathe it in with each step, half hoping it shields you, half knowing it is only the scent of fear made tangible. The homes begin to close up one by one, like eyes shutting against a storm. Curtains are drawn across narrow windows, shutters nailed tight, doors barred from the inside. Where once smoke curled cheerfully from every thatched roof, now some chimneys stand cold. You walk past them and wonder whether the family within has fled, or if they still lie inside, bodies unmoving, prayers unfinished. The lanes that used to bustle with barefoot children, with women carrying baskets, with men hauling firewood, fall eerily silent. Chickens still scratch in the dust, goats still bleat from their pens, but human voices retreat. You hear only the sound of the wind sliding through hedges, or the dull thud of a spade in earth. Even the dogs seem subdued, whining rather than barking, ears flat as though they sense something their masters cannot name. Abandonment creeps across the village. A plough lies overturned at the edge of a field, the ox still tethered, chewing grass as if unaware that its owner collapsed mid-furrow. A wash tub filled with half-rinsed clothes stands forgotten by the stream, the garments stiff now with dried soap. The blacksmith's hammer rests where it fell, the forge gone cold. Everywhere you look, work has been interrupted, as though life itself has paused. Inside the homes that still have occupants, light is dim. Families huddle together in corners, their faces gaunt from sleepless nights. The air is stale, heavy with the smell of sweat, sickness and smoke. Children cling to mothers too frightened to play, their eyes wide in the flickering glow of rush lamps. Conversation is hushed, words spoken only when necessary, as though too much noise might draw the plague to the door. The steward from the manor rides through once, trying to tally who still lives. He knocks on doors, but most remain closed. He shouts for men to gather, to keep fields tended, but few respond. His voice echoes down the lane, frustrated, desperate. He leaves without answers, his horse's hooves clattering in the empty street. After that, he does not return. You see more and more homes deserted altogether. Doors swing open in the wind, revealing rooms strewn with abandoned possessions. A wooden spoon on the floor, a cradle overturned, a cloak still hanging from its peg. Rats scurry freely across thresholds, gnawing at crumbs and scraps. The silence inside is worse than the coughing. At least coughing means someone is still alive. The churchyard expands as graves multiply, but even their abandonment shows. Flowers that used to be placed tenderly on mounds are absent now. Families too afraid or too exhausted leave their dead to the care of the priest and gravedigger. The gravedigger, once brisk in his work, moves now with the stiffness of a man crushed by endless labour. His shovel clinks against stones, his breath rattles. You wonder how long before his grave is dug by another hand. Fields at the edge of the village grow wild. Barley stalks bend under their own weight. Unharvested, bean rows vanish under weeds. Sheep wander unshepherded, bleating in confusion, their hooves trampling the crops. The rhythm of agricultural life, plant, weed, harvest, fractures. Hunger creeps in quieter than the plague, but just as deadly. You see children gnawing on hard crusts, mothers boiling thin pottage from whatever scraps remain. A few attempt to maintain routine. You see a woman sweeping her threshold, her face pale, her movements mechanical. A man repairs his fence, though no cattle remain inside. These small acts feel less like chores and more like prayers, rituals to hold back despair, yet around them the evidence of collapse grows. Roofs sagging because no one patches them, hedges untrimmed, paths overgrown with nettles. The village feels haunted, even though the people are still here. You walk down the main lane, and every closed shutter seems like a watching eye. You strain to hear breathing inside houses, relieved when you catch the faintest sound, unnerved when you hear nothing. Sometimes the silence is broken by a sudden scream, a cry of grief, of pain, of madness, and then it dies away again, swallowed by stillness. Even the animals sense the abandonment. Dogs roam in packs, no longer waiting for scraps from masters who never return. Cats slink through empty homes, their eyes glinting in the dim light. Oxen bellow in fields, their yokes still strapped across shoulders, their work forgotten. The rhythm of man and beast is broken, leaving chaos in its wake. And you realize the plague is not just killing people, it is killing the village itself. The houses that once hummed with life are becoming shells. The lanes that once echoed with laughter are becoming corridors of silence. The fields that once fed families are turning to wilderness. It is as though the very bones of the community are loosening, one joint at a time. When night falls, the darkness feels deeper than before. No lamplight glows through shutters. Only the stars shine down, cold and indifferent. You lie awake, listening to the emptiness, and you know with a sick certainty that abandonment is contagious too. Once one family leaves their home, others follow, until whole corners of the village lie hollow, waiting only for rats and weeds to claim them. The churchyard groans under the weight of too many dead graves that once stood neatly in rows, now crowd one another. The mounds fresh and raw, the earth unsettled and uneven. The smell of freshly turned soil clings to the air, mixed with the sharper scent of lime scattered hastily over bodies. You stand at the edge and see crosses leaning awkwardly, carved names left unfinished because there is no time. The priest mutters prayers so quickly they blur together, Latin syllables tripping from his tongue in a monotone rhythm that sounds more like exhaustion than hope. In the early days, funerals had dignity. Families gathered, hymns were sung, candles lit, but now, rites are abbreviated. A body is carried on a cart, lowered into a shallow pit, a sprinkle of water, a quick blessing, and then the grave digger sets to work. The soil falls heavy, thudding against shrouds, covering faces never to be seen again. You whisper a prayer yourself, not out of piety so much as fear. If the words are skipped, perhaps the soul will wander, angry, and bring worse upon the living. The gravedigger's shovel moves without pause, his arms corded from endless labor, his clothes caked with earth. He eats bread with muddy fingers, wipes sweat with the back of his hand, then returns to his work. He has buried friends, neighbors, even kin, and yet he does not stop. His eyes are hollow, his body stooped, but his rhythm continues. You wonder if digging graves has become the only way he knows he is alive. As deaths increase, single graves become impossible. Trenches are dug, long and deep, bodies laid side by side, each wrapped in simple cloth or sometimes not at all. The priest protests at first, insisting every soul deserves its own resting place, but necessity silences him. He blesses the pit as a whole, making the sign of the cross until his arm trembles. Villagers look away, unwilling to watch the piling of corpses like firewood, unwilling to imagine themselves among them. Children stand at the edges of burials, eyes wide, fingers clutching their mother's skirts. They do not cry, as though shock has numbed them. One boy kicks at the dirt, muttering that his father promised to return from the fields. His mother pulls him away sharply, but the look in her eyes reveals she wanted to say the same. At night, the churchyard is no longer silent. You hear the scrape of shovels under the moon, the groan of carts pushed in darkness. Burials happen at all hours, because bodies cannot wait in summer heat. The sound drifts into your dreams, a dull rhythm of earth swallowing flesh. Sometimes you wake and wonder whether you are hearing the living or the dead. Superstitions grow thick as the graves multiply. Some swear they hear whispers from the ground, voices of the unshriven calling for prayers. Others say lights flicker over the mounds, souls restless, wandering. A few claim the plague itself rises from the graves, a mist curling upward, spreading through the lanes like smoke. Mothers forbid children from plying near the churchyard, though there is little play left in them anyway. The priest tries to keep order. He sprinkles holy water liberally, swinging incense until the smoke stings your eyes. He speaks of resurrection, of eternal life, of paradise awaiting the faithful. His words feel thin against the evidence of so much decay. Some listen, nodding fiercely, clinging to the promise. Others turn away, muttering that paradise feels far, while the grave feels close. The sight of neighbours carried to the churchyard chips at the bonds that once tied the village together. When a family sickens, doors stay closed, not from cruelty but from fear. Bodies are left for the gravedigger to collect, sometimes lying a day or two before removal. You see crows gather on rooftops, waiting, their black shapes stark against the sky. Even the graveyard's boundaries strain. Fresh mounds creep outward, nibbling at hedges and paths. The living step carefully, avoiding the new earth, as though stepping on it might draw them downward. The village begins to smell not just of herbs and smoke, but of soil, constantly unsettled, damp and heavy. You carry it on your boots, into your home, into your bed. One evening, you walk past and see the gravedigger sitting on his shovel, head bowed. He mutters to himself, rocking slightly. He speaks names aloud, a litany of those he has buried, as if afraid he will forget them otherwise. His voice breaks on certain names, then steadies again. You realize he has become the keeper of the village's memory, the last witness for those lowered too quickly into the ground. By the end of the week, the bell tolls so often it feels constant, its mournful sound a cloak over the village. You find yourself no longer counting the dead, but counting the living, and each time you pass the churchyard, you imagine your own grave waiting, the earth already loosened, the cross already carved. The burials have become a rhythm, relentless, numbing, and yet each mound is a reminder. The plague is not an idea, not a rumor. It is here, carving names into the soil faster than memory can hold them. Children, once the constant noise of the village, are quieter now. Where their shouts and laughter once echoed through the lanes, only small voices remain, subdued, uncertain. You see them peering out from behind shutters, their faces pale, eyes wide, their playthings forgotten in the mud. A hoop lies half buried in dust near the well, a carved wooden horse abandoned by the smith's doorstep. It is as if childhood itself has been interrupted, suspended in the shadow of the plague. The youngest do not understand fully, though they sense enough. They ask questions their parents cannot answer. Why the bells toll so often? why their friends no longer come to play, why the air smells of smoke and earth. Some children cling to mothers with a desperation that leaves knuckles white, refusing to let go even when scolded. Others withdraw, sitting silently in corners, chewing their sleeves, staring at the floor. You notice how quickly they adapt, how utterly they learn to be quiet when adults lower their voices. When sickness enters a household, the children are the first to betray fear. They whimper at night when coughing grows harsh. They hide when a parent's skin blooms with black spots. Some try to help, fetching water or herbs, but their small hands tremble, spilling as often as they carry. Their eyes grow old too quickly, watching scenes no child should see. You feel a pang of pity that cuts deeper than hunger, the knowledge that innocence is being devoured alongside bodies. Death among children strikes hardest. The tiny coffin carried to the churchyard feels heavier than an ox cart. The priest's voice cracks as he recites prayers. Mothers collapse, fathers stare blankly at the ground. Other children watch from a distance, their faces unreadable, as if trying to learn how to mourn. They do not play afterward. They walk home in silence, their shoulders slumped, their games with sticks and hoops forgotten. Superstitions sprout around the young. Some mothers hang amulets around their children's necks, crosses carved from wood, pouches filled with salt or garlic. Others smear ash on small foreheads, whispering charms learned from grandmothers. You watch as one woman makes her son carry a sprig of rosemary everywhere, tucked behind his ear like a feather. The boy obeys solemnly, as if understanding that the herb is supposed to keep him alive. Yet, despite charms, the sickness does not spare them. You hear of households where every child perishes, leaving parents broken. You hear of orphans left wandering, knocking at doors that do not open. Some are taken in by relatives, others vanish, their fate whispered about but never confirmed. A few huddle together in abandoned homes, scavenging scraps, their thin voices calling for mothers who will not return. The village, once so full of children's clamour, becomes a place where silence is the loudest sound. Still, not all is bleak. Some children cling to fragments of play, even in the midst of fear. You see two girls skipping with a length of frayed rope, chanting rhymes about saints and angels, their laughter fragile but real. A boy carves figures from scraps of wood, setting them up in rows, pretending they are villagers at mass. Another hums a lullaby to himself while carrying water. The tune's soft but steady. These moments strike you sharply, like sparks in darkness. They remind you that life insists on itself, even when death presses close. Children also become messengers of resilience. A girl no more than 10 tends to her sick mother, dabbing her forehead with cloths soaked in vinegar, whispering prayers. A boy herds sheep alone in the fields, his small frame dwarfed by the animals, but his determination clear. You see them carrying burdens too heavy for their years, and you wonder if they will ever return to childhood, or if the plague has forced them into adulthood before their time. At night, their voices sometimes pierce the silence. A child crying for a lost father, another calling out in fever, another singing softly to calm siblings. The sound travels through the thin walls, haunting the lanes. You lie awake listening, feeling both sorrow and strange comfort. For as long as children cry, the village is not entirely dead. And yet, each morning, you notice fewer small figures running about. The games diminish. The toys gather dust. The songs fade. Childhood, once the most abundant thing in the village, has become rare, fragile, easily broken. You realize that when this plague finally passes, the survivors will not remember laughter in the same way. They will remember silence, and the way it swallowed the voices of the young. Work that could not stop still dragged on, even when the village itself seemed ready to collapse in silence. Sheep had no regard for plague or prayer. They bleated at dawn, restless in their pens, demanding pasture. You take up the shepherd's staff, leading them out toward the meadow, each step echoing louder than usual, because the lanes behind you are deserted. The air smells of dew and damp wool, and for a few moments you almost convince yourself life is unchanged. But then you turn back and see the shuttered windows, the absence of children running to chase the flock, and you remember that you walk in a half-empty world. The miller still tends his wheel, though fewer bring grain. He stands ankle-deep in water, scraping moss from the wooden paddles, his eyes hollow. He mutters that if the wheel stops turning, the whole village will starve, plague or no plague. You watch him lift sacks with trembling arms, grinding just enough to keep a little flour moving. The sound of the millstone, once constant, now comes in stuttering bursts, like a heartbeat faltering. Still, he works. Still, he insists. Fields cannot wait for morning either. The barley needs weeding, the beans thinning, or the season's effort will be lost. You see a few figures bent double in the furrows, hoes scraping against stones. Their movements are slow, mechanical, without chatter. Each cough makes the others flinch, but they do not stop. To leave the fields untended would mean hunger when winter comes, and hunger is as merciless as plague. Sweat stings your eyes as you stoop beside them, pulling weeds with stiff fingers, and you realize that survival has narrowed down to this: keep your hands moving, or you and yours will starve. The blacksmith lights his forge only once a week now, but even so the clang of hammer on iron is strangely reassuring. He shapes nails, repairs tools, patches a ploughshare for the reeve. Sparks fly upward, bright against the gloom, a reminder that some skills cannot be abandoned. He coughs between blows, his face pale, but he refuses to let the fire go out. Without nails, without tools, roofs collapse, carts break, fences fall. His hammer is as vital as the priest's prayers. Even women, burdened with sick households, find work that cannot be ignored. Bread must still be baked, water carried, children fed. You see one woman kneeling by the stream, scrubbing linen with hands cracked and raw. She pauses only to wipe her eyes with her sleeve before continuing, her grief folded into the rhythm of labor. Another stoops in the garden, yanking weeds among onions, lips moving in silent prayer. These tasks, once ordinary, have become acts of defiance. The plague can take bodies, but it cannot yet stop the turning of hands in soil. Animals, too, press their demands. Cows bawl for milking, goats kick until fed, chickens scratch impatiently. Neglect them, and they will wander or starve. You hear stories of villages where livestock roam free, masters gone, wolves circle at night, drawn by bleating and stench. Here, a handful still tether, still feed, still gather eggs. Their arms ache, their eyes burn, but they keep going. You find yourself milking by moonlight, the warm froth of milk splashing into a pail, the sound oddly comforting in the dark. The manor sends no new orders. The Lord has retreated behind his walls, his steward absent for weeks, yet the obligations remain, though unspoken. The fields must yield, the herds must live, the tools must be mended, or what survives will not be worth surviving. You realize that those who still work are not doing so for the Lord or even for coin. They work because to stop would be to surrender. And so, in the midst of death, life continues in fragments. You see smoke rise from a forge, hear the splash of the mill wheel, watch sheep cropping grass as though nothing has changed. These sights are not triumphs, but they are anchors. They tether the village to routine, to survival, to the faint hope that beyond plague there will still be bread, wool, meat, and seed for planting. Work becomes prayer in its own way. Each hoe that strikes soil is a plea. Let there be a harvest. Each sack lifted at the mill is a whispered bargain. Let there be bread. Each sheep guided to pasture is a candle. Let there be another spring. You feel it as you work, sweat running down your back, your muscles aching. You are not just feeding yourself, you are keeping alive the memory of what a village is supposed to be. At dusk you trudge home, hands blistered, clothes damp. You pass doors bolted shut, homes where no one emerges anymore. Yet in your arms you carry eggs, or a bundle of herbs, or a loaf of coarse bread, and you know that this is what keeps you from despair. The plague may strip away laughter, may silence bells with death, but so long as someone still works, the village is not wholly dead. And when you lay down that night exhausted, you remember the rhythm of the day, the hammer on iron, the creak of the mill wheel, the bleating of sheep. These sounds mingle with the toll of the church bell, forming a strange harmony, a song of survival, raw and fragile, but still a song. The healers come in many forms, none with certainty, all with weary faces. The village wise woman is the first you think of. She has lived on the edge of the green for as long as you can remember, her cottage crouched under a tangle of ivy, shelves lined with jars of dried leaves and roots. People whisper about her. Some say she knows too much of charms and moonlight. Others swear she saved children from fevers years ago. Now she is called to houses daily, clutching bundles of herbs, her hands stained green from crushing leaves. She presses poultices to swollen buboes, mutters prayers that mix saints' names with older words, leaves sprigs of rue in doorways. Sometimes the patient lingers longer, sometimes not. Families pay her with eggs, with loaves, with desperate gratitude. You see her shoulders stooping more each week, her eyes hollow as though the sickness she cannot cure is draining her instead. Then there are the priests, who style themselves as healers of souls, but find themselves pulled into tending bodies too. Your parish priest carries a flask of holy water, a cross, and the weight of expectation. He leans over the feverish whispering absolution into ears too weak to answer. He presses the crucifix against lips that barely move. You watch him walk from house to house, cassock hem caked in mud, voice cracked, hands trembling. He smells of incense and sweat, his face lined with grief. The villagers cling to him, yet even he looks upward with pleading eyes, as though waiting for mercy he cannot summon. Occasionally, travelling physicians arrive. They are strange, unsettling figures. You see one once, his face hidden behind a mask, with a long beak stuffed with herbs, rosemary, camphor, mint. He looks more bird than man, gloved hands prodding patients with a stick, never touching flesh directly. He mutters of corrupted air, of the need to rebalance humours. He prescribes bloodletting, so bowls are filled with red while the sick grow paler. He burns herbs in pans, fills rooms with choking smoke and ensures families it will purify the air. He collects his coin and moves on quickly, never staying long. You cannot decide if he fears the plague or the people. His presence leaves behind more dread than comfort. Some villagers turn to self-healing, brewing concoctions from whatever grows nearby. Nettle soup, garlic boiled in milk, vinegar rubbed on skin until it stings. Mothers press cool cloths against children's foreheads, whispering that it will help even when they know it will not. Fathers hang charms carved from bone above doorways, believing they can block death as surely as they block thieves. You try some remedies yourself, chewing cloves, carrying rosemary sprigs, washing your hands in vinegar until the skin cracks. They feel like armor though flimsy, yet without them you would feel naked before the storm. The line between healer and helpless blurs. You see men who once mocked the wise woman, now begging at her door. You see the priest, coughing into his sleeve, refusing to rest even as fever shines in his eyes. You see mothers, gaunt from sleepless nights, nursing children with whispered lullabies that sound like prayers. In these moments, everyone becomes a healer of sorts, holding, tending, hoping against evidence. But the truth presses in. Most remedies fail. The plague does not relent for charms or prayers, poultices or smoke. Burbos swell and burst, fevers climb, bodies weaken. The wise woman shakes her head more often now. The priest mutters prayers faster, as if speed might outpace death. The physician's advice is remembered bitterly. Let out more blood, he said, and the man died by morning. Still, people keep seeking, because to do nothing is worse than to act. Even if the action fails, remedies become rituals, ways to feel less powerless. Hanging herbs, lighting candles, whispering charms, each one is a thread villagers grasp as they dangle over the abyss. You do the same, tucking a sprig of sage into your tunic, breathing deeply as though it can guard your lungs. You know it may not work, but you cannot bear the thought of walking unprotected. At night you hear coughing in the distance, broken by the sound of chanting. Families gather around the sick, repeating prayers over and over. Their voices roar. Sometimes the prayers sound like lullabies, sometimes like battle cries. Sometimes they stop abruptly, replaced by sobs. You lie awake, clutching the herb at your chest, wondering if sleep itself is a risk. And yet, in rare moments, someone recovers. A child whose fever breaks after days of delirium. A woman whose bobos shrink until she can stand again. These recoveries spread through the village like sparks. The wise woman claims her poultice worked. The priest swears it was prayer. The physician insists his smoke cleansed the air. No one knows the truth. Perhaps survival is random, or divine, or a mix of both. But when someone rises from a bed thought to be their deathbed, hope stirs in every heart. For a moment, remedies seem worth the trying again. So the village continues its cycle of healing and helplessness. Herbs hung, blood let, prayers whispered, charms carved. Each death is a reminder of failure. Each survival a reminder of possibility. And you, caught between, continue to search for anything that will tip the balance when your turn comes. The market square is no longer the market square you remember. Once it was the living heart of the village, the place where carts rattled in, where neighbours bargained over onions and salted fish, where gossip spilled faster than coins. Now it is a hollow place, its stones empty, its stalls abandoned, its sounds swallowed by silence. You stand there one morning, basket in hand, and realise you are alone, except for a stray dog nosing at a toppled barrel. The dog looks up at you, ribs showing, and for a moment you both seem like ghosts wandering through what used to be life. The stalls still stand, but their wares are long gone. Wooden tables are bare, some half collapsed under rain. A length of rope dangles from one, swinging in the breeze like a forgotten sign. The butcher's block, once red with fresh cuts, is grey with dust. Flies buzzing lazily. The alewife's bench, where she sold foaming mugs and laughter, is deserted, her barrels cracked and leaking into the dirt. The air smells not of spices or roasting meat, but of damp wood and mould. You wrinkle your nose, remembering how once the market smelled of yeast and smoke and onions, thick enough to make your stomach rumble. Now the only smell is emptiness. Merchants no longer come. News has spread of sickness and wagons avoid your lanes. Salt is scarce, cloth rarer still. You try to imagine how long before shoes fall apart, before pots break with no one to replace them. Even the peddlers, men who once tramped fearlessly from town to town with packs of trinkets, keep their distance. The roads grow quiet. What once connected your village to the world beyond has frayed to nothing. Neighbours approach the square occasionally, but they do not linger. They slip in like shadows, carrying small bundles, bartering in whispers. A basket of beans exchanged for a sack of onions, a strip of wool for a clay pot. No crowds gather, no laughter rings. People glance over their shoulders constantly, afraid of who might be watching, afraid of who might cough. Even exchanges of food feel dangerous now, as if trade itself carries contagion. Children used to chase chickens through the stalls, squealing when merchants shooed them away. Now a child appears rarely, clutching a mother's hand, eyes wide. The square feels too large, too empty, swallowing their small figures. You realize how much the life of the village was measured by the square's noise. Without it, the place feels smaller, meaner, like a body drained of blood. The church bell tolls nearby, echoing off the empty stones. You see the priest cross the square, cassock brushing dust, head bowed. He looks smaller here too, as though without the crowd his voice is thinner. He does not pause, only mutters a blessing and disappears into another lane. Once he would have preached in the square itself, gathering all to hear. Now the square cannot gather anyone. Rumours cling like cobwebs. Some say the plague spreads most in places like the square, where people once mingled close. Others claim the square is cursed, that too many bodies have been carried through on their way to the churchyard. You feel a chill stepping across the stones, remembering how many carts have rolled here carrying not goods but corpses. The square has become less a market and more a passage for the dead. Yet, habit is hard to kill. You still come, even when nothing waits. So do others. Perhaps it is because the square was always where life happened, and the body remembers old rhythms. You stand, basket empty, and glance at another figure across the stones. You do not speak, only nod. That nod is enough. It is recognition, proof that you are not the last. Then you both leave quickly, the silence between you heavier than the exchange of goods would have been. At the edges of the square, weeds push through cracks in the stones. Nettles sprout where once children played. A stray hen clucks, pecking aimlessly, unbothered by the absence of masters. Time is reclaiming the space as quickly as fear. You wonder if, when the plague passes, the square will ever return to what it was, or if its silence will linger, a scar too deep to fade. By dusk, the square is deserted again. The shadows lengthen, swallowing the empty stalls, the bare stones, the dust. You hear only the cry of a crow, sharp and lonely. You turn away, your basket still empty, and feel the ache of absence settle in your chest. The square once promised life, connection, survival. Now it promises only echoes. Family bonds, once the surest anchor in a life of toil, are tested until they crack beneath the strain. In the beginning, families clung to one another more fiercely than ever. Mothers cradled feverish children, whispering lullabies that blurred into prayers. Fathers fetched water again and again, their arms shaking, refusing to admit the task was hopeless. Brothers carried sisters on their backs to the wise woman's cottage. Daughters ground herbs in mortars, their young faces set with determination far beyond their years. Everyone hoped that devotion might be stronger than disease. But the plague did not respect love. It seeped through walls, slipped under blankets, clung to breath. You watched families who did everything together fall one by one, as if closeness itself was a punishment. The very bond that had always been survival strength, shared hearths, shared labor, shared beds, became the surest way for illness spread. Some households disappeared entirely within a week, others dwindled, one member after another, until a lone survivor wandered the lane like a shadow, staring blankly at doors that no longer opened. And yet, despite the fear, many refused to abandon kin. You saw a girl no older than 12 wiping the brow of her father, though her mother screamed at her to step away. You saw a man digging a grave for his wife with his bare hands because no one else would help. You saw a woman holding her infant so tightly that when the child died in her arms, she could not unclench her fingers until neighbors pried them open. These scenes etched themselves into the village like wounds that will never heal. But there were darker choices too. Fear whispered that love could kill, and some listened. You heard stories of parents locking doors on sick children, of husbands fleeing fields when wives began to cough. One night, you passed a cottage and heard pounding fists from inside. Someone too weak to unlatch the door. Someone left behind. You hurried on, ashamed, heart racing, pretending you had not heard. Survival, once shared, had become individual. Meals shrank to silence. Where once families crowded around bowls of pottage, talking between mouthfuls, now they sat apart, spoons clinking softly, eyes fixed on one another with dread. A cough could make spoons freeze mid-air. Bread was broken with trembling hands, not in fellowship but in suspicion. Even affection became cautious. Hugs turned into brief touches, kisses withheld, words spoken from across the room. And yet, sometimes, love overcame fear even knowing the cost. You saw a mother lift her delirious son onto her lap, pressing his head to her chest while her own tears soaked his hair. You saw a husband sleeping on the floor beside his wife's bed, refusing to leave her side, though her bobos had burst. You saw sisters holding hands, whispering childhood secrets as one slipped away. These moments glowed faintly in the darkness, proof that compassion had not entirely died. Children bore the weight of family bonds differently. Some became caretakers, fetching herbs, watching younger siblings, cooking meals when parents could not. Their thin shoulders carried burdens too heavy, but they carried them all the same. Others broke under the strain, running from homes where death lingered, seeking refuge with neighbors only to find doors barred. The plague turned children into adults, and adults into frightened children, stripping roles of certainty. Weddings and births, once moments of joy binding families tighter, nearly vanished. But once you heard of a hurried marriage, a couple joined in the church at dawn, their hands trembling, the priest rushing through words. They said they wanted to be bound before death could part them. Days later, both were gone, buried side by side. People whispered it was tragic, but also strangely beautiful, as though love had claimed a final victory. The graveyard became the measure of family bonds. Graves dug close together showed households that clung until the end. Lone mounds told other stories. Those left without kin, buried quickly, mourned only by the priest and the gravedigger. Sometimes you saw small crosses clustered at the foot of a larger one, whole families pressed into earth as they had once crowded under one roof. The sight made your chest ache in ways hunger never had. Even for the living, bonds shifted. Survivors formed new households, widows joining widowers, orphans taken in by distant cousins. Some of these new families worked, knitting together like fresh cloth. Others unraveled quickly, suspicion too strong to allow trust. The plague reshaped kinship as surely as it reshaped fields and markets. You think often of your own family, those still alive, those gone. You remember laughter at the hearth, arguments over chores, embraces in times of hunger. Now those memories feel fragile, in danger. You guard them jealously, repeating them to yourself at night as though memory itself might preserve what flesh cannot. Family bonds, strained, broken, renewed, or transformed, became both the sharpest pain and the faintest hope in the plague years. They reminded you of what had been lost, but also of what still tied you to life, even in silence, even in fear. The thought of kin kept your hands moving, your heart beating, your prayers whispering into the darkness. At first, no one dares to speak it aloud. People whisper that the toll seems slower, that the gravedigger's shovel rests longer between burials, that the bell does not ring quite so often. It feels dangerous to hope, like tempting fate to return with sharper claws. Yet you notice it yourself. A whole day passes without a new grave. Then two, you walk past the churchyard, expecting the usual mound of fresh earth, and find only grass and silence. You stop, listening, wondering if your ears deceive you. The sickness does not vanish all at once. There are still coughs behind doors, still bodies carried to the churchyard, but the flood has become a stream, the torrent easing. Families that had braced for their own end remain standing. Children once feverish open their eyes again, weak but breathing. A man who had been raving in delirium rises, asks for bread. Each recovery feels like a miracle, though no one knows why it happens. The same remedies that failed others now appear to work, or perhaps the plague itself has grown weary, seeking new places to feed. The lanes show subtle signs of life. A shutter creaks open, sunlight falling on a pale face. A door swings wide, its latch unused for weeks. You see women step cautiously to the well, buckets in hand, glancing around as though expecting death to leap from the shadows. Men lead oxen into fields again, plows carving hesitant furrows. Children appear, blinking in the light, clutching ragged toys, their laughter thin but real. It is as though the village is stretching stiff limbs after a long fevered sleep. The priest declares that God has heard the prayers, that mercy has come at last. He rings the bell, not for death but for thanksgiving. His voice, ragged from endless funerals, lifts stronger than it has in months. People gather in the church again, though they sit apart, glancing nervously when someone coughs. Hymns rise, tentative at first, then louder. The sound fills the nave like water filling a dry well. You close your eyes, listening, and for the first time in weeks, you feel the knot in your chest loosen. Yet relief is laced with grief. As shutters open, absences become visible. You walk past homes where no one returns, doors still bolted, windows broken, weeds climb through thresholds, chickens roost on rooftops. The village is not whole. It will never be whole again. Survivors stand in the square, counting silently who is missing. Each face that appears is matched by another that does not. You realize that hope feels strange after so much loss, almost as painful as despair. The fields bear scars too. Crops left untended are thin and patchy, weeds choking furrows. Harvest will be poor, though at least there are hands again to gather it. Hunger may yet follow in plague's wake. Men mutter about catching more fish, about slaughtering livestock earlier than planned. Women gather nettles and wild greens to stretch pottage further. Survival still demands labor, but now it feels possible again, not futile. Children recover quickest, as children often do. Their laughter returns first, skipping ropes across the lanes, chasing one another past the churchyard as if graves were no more than obstacles in a game. Their joy stings the eyes of adults, a reminder of what was lost, but also a promise that life persists. You watch them play, your throat tightening, and you wonder how many even remember a time before silence. Some villagers, however, are slow to emerge. They cling to fear, staying indoors even as neighbours return to fields. You pass homes where shutters remain closed, where faces peep through cracks, but never step outside. Trauma lingers. Not all wounds are visible. The plague may be moving on, but its shadow still lies heavy in minds and hearts. Stories drift in of other places, still stricken. A merchant passing through says towns to the north are dying in droves, while villages to the south are nearly emptied. You realize your reprieve may be chance, that the plague has not ended, but simply shifted. Gratitude mixes with guilt. Why should your village endure while others fall? You say a prayer for them, but you know it changes nothing. Even as life stirs, the memory of death is everywhere. You see it in the gravedigger's hollow stare, in the priest's shaking hands, in the lines etched into faces that once smiled easily. The village is quieter now, more cautious. Laughter comes, but it is softer, quickly swallowed. Work resumes, but without the old rhythm of shared songs and chatter. You sense that everyone fears joy might summon plague back again. Still, there is undeniable change. The air feels lighter, the silence less suffocating. The lanes no longer echo only with coughs but with footsteps, with the creak of carts, with the splash of water drawn from the well. The village breathes again, shallow but steady. You breathe with it, half afraid, half relieved, knowing the shadow has not vanished but has at least moved on. And when night falls, you hear not just weeping but murmurs of gratitude. Families gather at hearths whispering thanks, sharing bread even if it is hard and scant. Children drift to sleep to the sound of stories again. Not only prayer, you lie down staring at the roof beams and let yourself imagine tomorrow. That thought, once unthinkable, feels almost like a luxury. When at last the fever of death begins to ebb, the first task of the living is not to celebrate, but to count. You rise one morning to the sound of voices in the lane, quiet, hesitant, but voices nonetheless. Neighbours are stepping out of their houses, some blinking as though sunlight is new to them, some clutching children tightly, some looking gaunt as scarecrows. They glance at each other with suspicion first, then with dawning relief. For weeks the lanes had been empty except for carts bearing the dead. Now feet scuff the dirt again. The counting begins informally. At the well, women ask, "Who is left in your house?" The smith raises 2 fingers, himself and his eldest son. The miller shakes his head, silent, unable to speak of numbers that no longer reach beyond 1. A mother whispers that 3 of her 6 children still breathe. Each exchange is heavy, every answer a wound reopened. You watch faces tighten as totals fall short, see eyes glisten when names are spoken that no one will answer to again. Soon, the priest calls a gathering in the square. It is the first time so many have stood together in months. The air feels thick with unease. People stand apart, out of habit, yet they come. The priest, thinner now, his cassock patched at the elbows, reads aloud the names he has buried. The list stretches on and still on. You shift on your feet as it lengthens, the silence of the crowd pressing down heavier with each word. By the end, he has named more dead than living. No one cheers, no one prays aloud. They only bow their heads, each person counting the cost. The gravedigger adds his own tally, his voice rough. He speaks of trenches filled, of earth that will not settle for months. He names families entirely gone, cottages that will never open again. The square echoes with absence. You look around and realize how many doors will stay shut forever. How many hearths are cold. The village has survived, but only as a shadow of itself. And yet, survivors must continue. Tools are gathered, fields inspected, flocks rounded. Men who never worked side by side before now share ploughs, because one has oxen and the other still has seed. Women join kitchens, baking bread together because flour is too scarce to waste. Orphans are folded into households that barely have room, yet make space. The bonds of necessity weave new patterns. stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. The lanes echo with repairs, a roof patched here, a fence rebuilt there. Smoke rises from chimneys again, though thinner. As food is stretched carefully, the square remains empty of merchants, but neighbours trade what little they have. Beans for eggs, milk for onions. These small exchanges feel monumental, proof that the village still functions. Counting the survivors becomes an act of grim pride. "We are 34, someone says, and another answers, "We were 80. The numbers hang in the air, sharp as knives. Each survivor feels both blessed and burdened. You see it in their eyes, the guilt of living, the weight of remembering. Children ask after missing friends. Parents hush them quickly, unwilling to repeat names too painful. The priest urges thanksgiving, but his voice wavers. He knows faith is fragile, frayed by unanswered prayers. Still, he lifts his hands, calling for gratitude that anyone remains at all. People murmur responses, their words shaky but real. They cannot deny survival, even if they cannot explain it. At night, families sit together, smaller circles around hearths. The silences are long, but slowly, words return. Stories of those lost are told in whispers, then in louder voices, as if speaking their names might keep them alive a little longer. Children listen, eyes wide, absorbing memory as inheritance. The dead remain present in every tale, in every gesture, in every empty seat. You realize that counting the survivors is not just arithmetic. It is a way of redrawing the village's map, of understanding who will share the work, who will share the grief, who will share the future. It is a ritual as important as harvest or prayer. Without it, you would all feel scattered, broken. With it, you can at least see the outline of community again, even if the heart has been hollowed out. Still, each count is also a reckoning. For every name spoken, another unspoken. For every child who runs across the lane, another lies in the churchyard. Survival feels like theft, as though life was stolen from one to spare another. You wrestle with the question at night, why you? Why now? The question has no answer, only the echo of silence. And so the days pass, the numbers fixed. 34, fewer hands to till, fewer voices to sing, fewer backs to bear burdens, but enough. Enough to keep the wheel turning, enough to keep bread baking, enough to keep the memory of the dead alive in the mouths of the living. The plague has moved on, but its tally lingers, carved into the soil, etched into hearts. Counting survivors becomes the way to begin again, and though the numbers are too small, you cling to them, because they are all that remain. The village is not the same, and it never will be. You feel it in the rhythm of the days, in the air itself, in the weight of silence that still clings even as shutters open and smoke rises again from hearths. When the plague moves onward, it leaves behind more than graves. It leaves scars, visible and invisible, on every field, every cottage, every soul who breathes still. The church bell rings once more for prayers of thanksgiving, but it sounds hollow. Too many hear only echoes of the tolls for the dead. Yet people gather, cautious but willing, drawn less by joy than by the need to stand together. The priest, gaunt and hoarse, lifts his hands, speaking of survival as miracle. You listen, but your eyes drift to the empty pews, to the gaps where whole families once sat. Even in gratitude, absence is louder. Work resumes. The smith beats iron again, though his hammer strikes slower. The miller grinds what little grain remains, his wheel creaking with age and exhaustion. The women sweep their thresholds, plant winter greens in neglected gardens, mend cloaks worn thin by grief. Children chase each other timidly at first, their laughter brittle, but gradually louder. You see one boy play with a hoop again, running across the square that had been abandoned for months. The sight makes your throat tighten, proof that life insists on returning, even when hearts lag behind. But rebuilding is heavy. The fields, left untended, yield poorly. Hunger looms as the next shadow. Villagers gather to discuss rationing, to decide which animals can be spared for meat, which must be saved for breeding. Cooperation grows from necessity. Households share what they have. Widows taken in by neighbours, orphans folded into families. barely managing themselves. Each arrangement is awkward, sometimes resentful, but essential. Bonds form where none existed before, weaving new threads into the fabric of the community. You notice changes in people's eyes. Some stare longer at the horizon, as if expecting more death to come walking back down the road. Others avoid speaking of the plague at all, as though silence can keep it buried. A few turn to piety with renewed fervor, lighting candles daily, kneeling until knees bruise. Others drift away from the church, muttering that prayers did not save their children. Faith itself has been reshaped, fractured in some, sharpened in others. The houses of the dead stand like hollow teeth. Some are pulled down for timber, their beams reused to repair homes still standing. Others are left to sag, roofs collapsing, nettles crawling through thresholds. You walk past them and feel their emptiness pressing against you. They are not just ruins, they are reminders, monuments to voices lost. The village itself is smaller now, its heart contracted. Time dulls the immediacy of fear, but sharpens memory. Survivors begin to tell stories, passing them in whispers by the fire. Children hear how their parents dug graves in haste, how the wise woman brewed endless remedies, how the priest's voice cracked as he read names. These stories become part of the village's fabric, not just memory but warning. You realize that for generations children will grow up hearing about the year the plague came, the year the bells tolled without pause, the year the village nearly died. And yet, slowly, life thickens again. You hear music at dusk, someone plucking a fiddle, hesitant at first, then bolder. You smell bread baking, richer than before, neighbors pooling what they have for feasts to remind themselves of abundance. You see couples walking together, heads bent close, talking not of death but of marriage, of children, of planting new seed. Life, stubborn as weeds, pushes up through every crack. Still, you know the village is marked forever. The scars cannot be erased. Every grave is a line in the earth, every absence a silence in conversation, every empty cottage a shadow across memory. Even in joy, grief will sit beside you at the table, but perhaps that is survival too. Not forgetting, but carrying forward. As autumn comes, the fields yield less than hoped, but enough. Winter will be lean, but not empty. Families prepare, storing what they can, mending clothes, repairing roofs. The village is smaller, thinner, quieter, but alive. That word alone feels like victory. When night falls, you sit outside your cottage, listening. The silence is no longer absolute. You hear footsteps, a distant laugh, the lowing of cattle, the creak of a cartwheel. Above, the stars shine as they always have, cold and indifferent, yet somehow comforting. You breathe deeply, the air cool, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke. You are alive, and as you close your eyes, you realize survival is not just a number, not just counting who remains. It is the act of living again, of daring to hope, of planting seed in soil still heavy with graves. It is remembering those lost not to paralyze, but to shape the future. The village that faced the plague did not vanish. It is smaller, altered, scarred, but it stands, and so do you. The wind softens. The night grows quieter. Words slow into longer, gentler breaths. Imagine the fields resting under the moonlight. The cottages dark but standing. The church bell silent at last. The plague has passed, and the village sleep. You drift with it, carried on the rhythm of breath, the hush of earth settling. The story fades, not with fear, but with stillness. Let your eyes close, let your body loosen. You are safe here, in memory, in survival, in rest. Sleep comes like morning fog, gentle, enveloping, without demand. You breathe once more, and let go. Good night, traveler, sweet dreams.